Hello and welcome to the State of Soy. I'm Katie James, Public Relations Manager at the Iowa Soybean Association. This month, we're coming to you from Iowa State University's BioCentury Research Farm outside of Boone, Iowa. But you don't have to be a Cyclone fan to know that new uses for Iowa soybeans are a win for everybody. On this episode of the State of Soy, we'll discover how research here in Iowa is leading to soybean-based asphalt at home and around the country. We'll also hear from new leadership at Bayer and some recent victories when it comes to transporting soybeans along the supply chain. We'll see what's next for Sukup grain bins as they welcome a new CEO. And we'll hear from a Northwest Iowa farmer who says cover crops are to no-till what peanut butter is to jelly. We'll finish today's episode out with some sights from Iowa Soybean Association's recent trade mission to Bangladesh and Pakistan. We begin today with the new Chief Operating Officer at Bayer. He spoke with the State of Soy on the latest happenings at Bayer and his message to soybean farmers. Brett Begeman says when it comes down to it, farmers have to do what works for their farm.
Well, it's an exciting time. As you know, we've launched XtendiMax, and that's on 60 million acres of cotton and soybeans now, and XtendFlex is coming right behind that. And we have two more generations of new exciting herbicide systems coming in soybeans, and not to mention the ongoing breeding program to continue to bring new genetics. So we're pretty excited about what the portfolio looks like in soybeans. Our customers have been fantastic. They've supported us through this process. We had an expressed approach that we wanted business continuity and taking care of our customers. Our employees stepped up to the plate and did that. It's been a really challenging year for all of us in agriculture with the weather in North America last year. But we made our way through that very well, and the merger's going great. Weed management has always been a challenge in agriculture, and as some of the weeds became resistant to some of the more popular systems out there, alternatives start coming into the marketplace. And what I always encourage farmers is look for the ones that work on your farm. Look for the ones that are based in good genetics to optimize your yields across your farm. But you need to look at it on your own farm and pick the one that works for you. And I'm thrilled that there's more and more choices coming because it's great for farmers to have choices. And my last thing would be don't rely on any single thing. Multiple modes of action is really important when you're looking at managing weeds and weed resistance, and that's something that farmers are doing a lot more of recently. I would encourage them to continue to think about multiple modes of action regardless of system that they're using. It looks like it's going to be challenging, and commodity prices don't look like they're changing a lot in the near term, and that by itself creates part of the challenge. But I always suggest to farmers to be open to possibilities and open to new things. This is an industry that's changing really fast. Technology is coming at us really fast, both on the digital side as well as on the agronomic side. Look for new ideas and share with each other and find things that help you improve the efficiency and the overall productivity of your operation. And some of those things can come from Bayer, some of them can come from others. And I just encourage you to have an open mind about the possibilities, particularly with new things and in the data and data analytics space. I think there's some real opportunities for breakthroughs in agriculture. Well, we're really getting to that point where we have critical mass of information now. Nearly 50% of the corn, soybeans, and cotton are now on FieldView, so we have a large database that we can look at. And it's really getting to the point where now we can do such a better job of scripting fields and picking hybrids and picking varieties and placing them in the fields where they have the highest probability of success, using herbicides, fungicides, insecticides only where we need them in the field. And I think there's also an opportunity to continue to leverage this data, working with the fertilizer companies to better utilize nutrients in the field as well. And I think there's going to be some step changes here that are really going to help the farmers. So I'm really excited about it. Well, I think one of the biggest challenges we've all faced is trade's important in agriculture, and that's been a challenge for us the last couple of years. But we're making progress on that front as an industry, working with the various governments, and I think that'll continue. There's a tremendous opportunity for growth in soybeans around the world as disposable incomes continue to grow and consumers are looking for more animal protein and healthier diets. Soybeans fit right in the middle of both of those. And I believe it's really exciting to see those economies continue to grow and more consumers coming into a position of being able to utilize higher value products that soybeans is a significant contributor to. So I think it's just a continuation of what we've had in building that market, continuing to talk to consumers and society about the benefits of soybean.
Coming up next on the State of Soy, we'll hit the road. or in this case, the soybean-based asphalt track.
This edition of the State of Soy sponsored in part by Ag Processing Incorporated, AGP, a trusted partner of the soybean farmer in the procuring, processing, marketing, and transportation of oilseeds, grains, and related products. Farm Credit Services of America, dedicated to financing agriculture. The entire organization, from the people to the ag-friendly products, services, and support, works to help producers succeed. Farm Credit Services of America, agriculture works here. People's Company, their global perspective grounded in rural farming roots and a drive to continually innovate is what makes People's Company one of the nation's leading providers of land brokerage, land management, land appraisal, and land investment services. And by Bayer. Bayer, shaping agriculture by challenging the impossible.
When the soybean made its debut in Iowa decades ago, farmers called it the miracle bean because of its many diverse uses. Today, that sentiment rings true. Soybeans provide an environmentally friendly alternative to several petroleum-based products. Most recently, research done right here at the BioCentury research farm, funded in part by the Iowa Soybean Association, led to a test track in Alabama made of soybean-based asphalt. The State of Soy traveled south with Iowa soybean farmer Roland Schnell to get the dirt on this new asphalt.
You have to make a decision whether to invest farmer checkoff dollars in a new venture, hoping that it will produce results. And granted, 100% of those results are not always achieved, but we went ahead and invested in it, and it's coming to fruition.
When you do these things in the lab, you hope that you're mimicking what happens at a commercial scale, but there's a little bit of risk there, right? And it's performing beyond what we would have expected, and it's great to see that.
Yeah, we evaluate these pavement test sections with a technology that most state DOTs use for evaluating their networks. And it's really just a van equipped with a lot of laser sensors and LiDAR sensors that enable us to see the rutting, measure the rutting at highway traffic speeds, enable us to measure cracks, the extent of cracks, the severity of cracks, and we can follow that performance, from day zero, right after construction, all the way through, the long-term performance of that test section. Really, what has a big impact on the performance of pavements is the environment. The rain, the cold weather, the freeze-thaw cycles, along with the traffic, you can really kind of evaluate the cracking resistance, long-term durability. We've had about 6 million equivalent single axle loads applied to the test sections, and that's over about 18-month period. The USB sections are performing beautifully. I mean, they look exactly like we would expect them to perform. There's no rutting, no cracking whatsoever. The smoothness measurements that we make. So in all aspects, performance is really what we want to see for a new product like this.
It's laying down on the road after a lot of miles, and it looks brand new. It's really got durability, especially compared to some of the other test sections that were present. This particular product, put down with the soy-based polymer, just looked beautiful.
When you start off 10 years ago, you're working in a lab, you have a dream, and then to see this dream being realized today, and as we're going forward, it's just really exciting. And working for a public institution, part of my responsibility is to create value for our society. And I truly believe this is going to create an immense value to people in Iowa, but across the United States.
It's a win-win for the environment, it's a win-win for farmers, and it's a win-win for the general public because it's going to make better roads at a lower cost that'll last many more years. I see it almost as a parallel to the way biodiesel was developed years ago. I see a bright future, another use of our soybeans that we raise on the farm, and that's going to add dollars to the bottom line of every soybean producer in the country as it's developed. We're using more product at home, we're putting value in it. It's a win-win for farmers. It's going to make not only the price of soybeans better, but the livestock producers that use the protein side of the soybean are going to have a less expensive product because we're using more of the oil on a value-added thing. So it's exciting. I see a bright future. My first memory of soybeans was my father planted them with his old International Engaged seeder. He went out there and baled the stubble and fed to the hogs. And I remember those picky bales. I had no idea that little soybean that my father was not utilizing in those days because we didn't know how, but ever develop into something that we have today, a valuable product that has so many and varied uses.
Up next on the State of Soy, we'll get the latest on soy transportation.
Hope. It's a hard thing to hold on to in the face of adversity. But it's where you belong. Keep moving forward. Prove to the world you have what it takes. So the next time you feel defeated, don't forget. That grit, that determination, it got you here. Remember, you were made for this.
Progress is a human invention. We look at our world and we imagine how to make it better. That's the power of human ingenuity. We can redefine what's possible. At Bayer, we're shaping the future of agriculture, like farms where all life grows together. It's not impossible, it's progress.
Whether it's soybean-based asphalt or a vessel shipping soybeans to another country, soybean farmers know the journey is just as important as the destination. The State of Soy caught up with the Soy Transportation Coalition to get the latest scoop on soybean transit.
Soybean farmers recognized a number of years ago that if they don't get transportation right, they won't be profitable as an industry. And if farmers aren't willing to be engaged in this issue, they shouldn't expect other people to do it for them. So that's really the impetus behind the creation of the Soy Transportation Coalition. It's to really focus farmer attention and engagement on this multimodal system, whether it's rural roads and bridges, our highways and interstates, our freight rail system, our inland waterways with our locks and dams, or our ports. All of those modes are important to the profitability of the soybean farmer, and so it very much merits attention. And so that's really the focus of the organization. The lower Mississippi River, and this is the stretch of the river that starts at mile 232 on the lower Mississippi River by Baton Rouge, Louisiana, goes past New Orleans at mile 100, and then the Gulf of Mexico is essentially mile 0. That area of the river accounts for 60% of U.S. soybean exports, 59% of corn exports, so by far the #1 launching point for both commodities. I'm often asked, if you could pick one infrastructure investment that would provide the greatest benefit to the greatest number of soybean farmers, what would it be? And this is really the one that I would select. And so there's this effort to deepen that stretch of the river from 45 feet in water depth to 50 feet in depth, so an additional 5 feet. When you load a vessel, there's kind of a point where you have to turn off the spigot that you're using to load that vessel because the ship might scrape the bottom of the river. We estimate you can put an additional 500,000 bushels of soybeans per vessel if you go that additional 5 feet. So that's been the long aspiration for agriculture and a host of other industries. The lower Mississippi region is the #1 port region for the entire United States in terms of volume of freight handled. So it's very important to our overall economy. We were very pleased as of late that Congress provided funding for this project. The Army Corps of Engineers, which is the government agency that oversees this project, they provide authorization for it, and they gave the green light for it. So this project is actually going to move forward. So very good news on infrastructure this year. Congress has to do a couple things that they're obligated to do. #1 is what's called a Water Resources Development Act, and that's kind of establishing a strategy for how we improve our inland waterway system with our locks and dams. Congress also is obligated to do what's called a highway bill, and that's more related to highways and bridges and rural roads and whatnot. And what our real focus is to make sure that the needs of rural America get included in that. It's very easy for the needs of urban America to really squeeze out and crowd out the needs of rural America. And we need to really make sure we're attentive to both. Even though farmers numerically they're a shrinking constituency in the United States, it's still a constituency that has a lot of credibility. And when farmers do get engaged in an issue, good things can actually happen. And I think we've seen that when it comes to trying to get some of these trade issues resolved, to getting some forward momentum on renewable fuels. I think that can happen on infrastructure as well. So farmer engagement's really key. Brazil has been making some improvements to their infrastructure. They realize they need to do more. We still have the competitive advantage when it comes to supply chain and global logistics, but that competitive advantage is eroding. So it really is incumbent upon us to make sure that we're making these needed investments in all of those modes of transportation. It doesn't do a whole lot of good if all of the links in your chain are made out of stainless steel if one of the links of that chain is a twisty tie. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So they all have to be working in concert with one another if we want to be competitive in the global marketplace.
Speaking of working together, we'll hear from the world's largest family-owned and operated grain storage business when we come back.
This edition of the State of Soy sponsored in part by Ag Processing Incorporated, AGP, a trusted partner of the soybean farmer in the procuring, processing, marketing, and transportation of oilseeds, grains, and related products. Farm Credit Services of America, dedicated to financing agriculture. The entire organization, from the people to the ag-friendly products, services, and support, works to help producers succeed. Farm Credit Services of America, agriculture works here. People's Company, their global perspective grounded in rural farming roots and a drive to continually innovate is what makes People's Company one of the nation's leading providers of land brokerage, land management, land appraisal, and land investment services. And by Bayer. Bayer, shaping agriculture by challenging the impossible.
A hallmark of any agricultural landscape, grain bins and grain storage play an important role in each farming operation. Iowa Soybean Association's Aaron Putsey traveled to Sheffield, Iowa, home of Sukup Manufacturing, to catch up with their new CEO, a longtime agriculturalist and, of course, a member of the Sukup family.
We're here at Sukup Manufacturing and I'm visiting with Steve Sukup, president of Sukup Manufacturing. First of all, thank you for welcoming us to your home. Tell us about your facility here in Sheffield.
Well, at our facility here, we've got around 650,000 square feet under roof for manufacturing. And then we're here in our tech center that we built going on 6 years ago. And so we've really enjoyed it. We've been able to do safety dinners here, when we also do some Christmas parties here as well.
Very good, and it really is. I mean, it's a landmark up here in Sheffield. Tell us about how many people you employ and how many years have you been in business now?
Well, we employ around 650 people through our Sheffield office here. And then actually we've got another 150 out in Pittsburgh making steel buildings. So company-wide, we're around 800 folks. We started back in 1963. Dad had this idea of an auger on top of in a grain bin, and so that's where we got rolling.
Now I understand though, that first idea, he took 5 or 6 units. He was surprised when he came back, and I think only 3 had sold, 1 was returned. Yeah. And he decided he needed to go back to the drawing board, didn't he? What was the improvement he made?
Well, that's one sort of learned from Dad is perseverance. So Dad always stayed on, and one of the things that he found out is, you know, there's a little bit of manual labor going with that auger, and that he attached to a drill, a regular mechanics drill, and that was a little bit too much work, and they needed an automated system, and so that's when he came up with the stirring machine.
Sukup Manufacturing is a company that's been all about innovation, and we know it started, you know, with Gene. It started really in the grain conditioning, grain management. But wow, you've evolved as agriculture's evolved, haven't you?
Yes, we have. When our customers started changing their drying habits, in-bin drying's a great efficient method, but it's going to be, you know, 300 bushels per hour drying, and our customers are starting to look for 500,000, 2,000 bushels drying per hour. We've actually made a dryer that's 10,000 bushels per hour. Wow. So agriculture's expanded greatly, and we were able to keep up with it. In the last 20 years, we've grown 8 times larger.
and 80% of the products we're making now, we weren't making then. So it wasn't that we just kept making the same thing faster and better. It was new ideas, new developments.
As you know, margins are tight, if non-existent. And so, you know, farmers are looking at anything that they can do to add a little bit more income opportunity. What's at a decision point, Steve, in that process, and when it comes to one of the most important assets they have, which is the grain that they produce?
Just talked to a good customer. He's a CFO of a trucking industry company, and he was at the ethanol annual meeting and says, hey, I put up one of your new 70,000 bushel bins in the fall, and I made 60 cents here this spring now that when I'm starting to market my grain.
Real money.
So that's real money that can make a difference for them.
How has some of the trade friction over the last couple of years impacted Sukup Manufacturing?
It's really been more of a challenge than we expected. First would be the steel tariffs. Sukup Manufacturing, for our grain bins, we buy 100% all U.S. steel. So when they said they were going to have a steel tariffs, we thought, okay, maybe prices will go up 5%. Well, the tariff was 25%, and then the steel mills added another 5% to that, so our steel prices went up 30% over a very short period of time. And you know, you can't pass all that on to your customers. And so that made some difficulties there. And then on the other aspect, when our soybeans and corn products were getting hammered on the international market, or with China being our #1 customer of soybeans, it's been a rough couple of years out there.
The signing of a phase 1, it didn't change everything immediately, obviously, as we've seen. I mean, prices have been slow to respond, but at least it's moving in the right direction. Do you sense that?
Yes, and that's what markets like, is consistency and knowing what's going to happen. And I think with the trade agreement, the USMCA is a good basis for that we can build on. You know, Mexico and Canada have been great trading partners of ours for a long time, and so we're looking to that solidifies it.
And of course, I would be remiss without thanking you for Sukup Manufacturing's support of the atrium at Iowa Soybean Association, which itself is also a bin and holds about 51,000 bushels of grain. So, Steve, thank you again. Thank you.
Aaron,
We appreciate the chance to connect with you, and we wish you all the very best in your new role.
I appreciate that, and we appreciate Iowa Soybean Association.
Coming up next on the State of Soy, we'll head to Northwest Iowa to see a soybean farmer managing his operation with profitability and conservation in mind.
Hope. It's a hard thing to hold on to in the face of adversity. But it's where you belong. Keep moving forward. Prove to the world you have what it takes. So the next time you feel defeated, don't forget. That grit, that determination, it got you here. Remember, you were made for this.
Progress is a human invention. We look at our world and we imagine how to make it better. That's the power of human ingenuity. We can redefine what's possible. At Bayer, we're shaping the future of agriculture. Like farms where all life grows together. It's not impossible, it's progress.
This Northwest Iowa farmer knows a thing or two about no-tilling, but when he found the role cover crops could play on his farm, it showed him his new possibilities. Doug Adams is a farmer who practices what he preaches by working in harmony with his land.
I started farming in 1993, the year I graduated from high school. I had the opportunity. My dad has an off-farm job, so we were able to start farming my senior year in high school. And then I went to 2 years of college at Iowa Lakes Community College, farming at the same time, working with a neighbor. You know, when you're starting out farming, you're buying equipment, and so in order to save some money, I looked at the reduced tillage as a way to not need as much equipment, or not as big of equipment, not as expensive as equipment. And I was also working part-time at the NRCS office at that time. So, any time I could save not being out in the field usually put me in town where I was getting a paycheck. So that also helped grow the operation as well. 2012 is when we started adopting cover crops, and that spring was a nice warm spring, and so the farmers that were doing cover crops, we had some excellent growth and it really looked impressive. So that fall I thought I should give it a try on my own operation and help improve the soil health that we had been working on building with our no-till and strip-till. And so that fall we started with some fertilizer and rye seed mixed in and just spread that after harvest. Since then we've always been increasing our acres of cover crops and trying some different mixes just to see what will work for us. At the NRCS office where I work full-time now, we discuss soil health practices, no-tills, a big one, do not disturb your soil. So I like to say our no-till and cover crops go together like peanut butter and jelly. So the two just work so well together, cereal rye and soybeans, it's ideal. My cover crop cost is about $32 an acre. And for running conventional tillage, including chopping the corn stalks, disc rip, a field cultivator pass, I believe it was over $50 an acre. So there's probably $15 per acre that I'm saving over the conventional farmer in our neighborhood system. The yields I believe are the same. Iowa State University does studies looking at yield differences between tilled and no-till soybeans, and there's hardly any difference in yield. So it sure saves me a lot of time, saves the soil, and with the cover crops and no-till really improves my soil health. One of the reasons I did it was in our part of the state, we're the prairie pothole region, so we're really not very steep, but when we get rains, all that water runs into those potholes and drowns out our crops. And then you'll get that dry spell and the hilltops start burning up, so you kind of get a double whammy. The low ground doesn't yield, the high ground doesn't yield. And so my thought was if I can get that raindrop to soak in wherever it falls, it's going to do me the most good. So that's where I started looking at the cover crops and no-till systems. I'm somebody that has money in the game. I'm not just somebody that's reading out of a brochure saying that this is going to work on your farm. I'm actually doing it on my farm and implementing it. And so that weighs a lot with the farmer. Farmers are always interested in learning what's going on new and if it's going to work or not on their farm, because your whole livelihood is based upon your income for the year is on your yields and stuff. So they don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize their yields. My grandfather, who bought this farm in the 30s, started farming with tractors. He was the first generation to start using tractors. And then as they proceeded, through the generations, my dad, quit doing the moldboard plowing, went to chisel plowing. And so, each generation we can figure out new things, new better ways to do it. The cover crops are more of a way to work in harmony with the land. And I think it seems to be working really well. It actually helps save some money too. It's interesting to watch the change in the farm over the years, that's for sure. I'd like to try to grow my own cover crop seed to kind of help reduce that cost there, and that would help open up diversity to planting a more diverse summer cover crop mix that I think I could get some benefit from. Another thing we've been reading quite a bit about is going to 60-inch corn rows where you can grow a cover crop in between. It'll actually get some sunlight. I've tried it in 30-inch rows, and by fall everything had disappeared because it couldn't compete with that corn crop. So I can see where those 60-inch corn rows, people say it doesn't lower your yield, but if we can grow a cover crop that'll help build our soil health for the future, I think that's a good thing.
Doug is one of a multitude of Iowa soybean farmers working to leave their farm a better place for future generations. That wraps up this edition of the State of Soy. If you have any comments or story ideas for the show, feel free to send me an email or give us a call. As we close the show, we leave you with photos of emerging soybean markets and current trading partners, Pakistan and Bangladesh, courtesy of Aaron Pudsey.